when you start asking, how do I, or what could I, or what's possible, everything changes because your mind is like, I got to find an answer. And then you wake up, you're like, oh, wow, where did that come from? It's because it's in you if you ask the questions.
Hi, welcome back, or welcome, guys, to the Man of Mastery podcast. This is episode 61. Really the purpose here is to challenge yourselves to be uncommon in your thinking. And I was thinking a little bit this week in reflection on what the value is that you could get or you should get in your time here. Now, only you can really speak to what you're taking away and applying and the changes and the results you're getting. But in terms of the guests, a lot of these guys that I have I'm just going to say we're blessed to have the opportunity to have a conversation with. A lot of these guys will charge $5,000 or $10,000 to get up on stage and deliver a packaged version of their story, not even a Q&A. And we have the opportunity to learn from them here for 30, 45, 60 minutes or more sometimes. So there's a huge value to the time that they're offering us and the knowledge they're sharing. And so I hope you're finding ways to take that and apply it and get value out of the time you're investing in it. That's your cost, right? Your time. And these guests, they range in their professional and their personal focus, but underlying that, there's an underlying current. There's an understanding that success isn't easy. It's not supposed to be easy. Life isn't supposed to be easy. To quote my coach, Jim Bro, easy makes us weak. And really, the harder it gets, the stronger we get. I mean, that's true. Now, today's guest, Damion Lupo, he fits that theme, the theme of a multidiscipline approach to self-improvement and finding success really apart from the herd. In fact, we talk about even redefining success as we talk about Damion's business and business ventures and his financial wins and lessons. He built a $20 million business that he then lost and went $5 million into debt. And we talk about quote unquote overnight success in what people see, but really it's come after a decade of work. And we talk about really realigning or redefining success and focusing sort of less on what success means and more about fulfillment. So I think this is really timely for a lot of people that right now feel like they're maybe in a rut or they're on a plateau. And mastery, it's really not about what happens in those step changes. It really is about what happens in the plateaus. That's where the magic happens, in putting in the reps. In fact, we talk a little bit today, Damion and I, about a book by George Leonard around mastery that inspired the title and the name of this podcast. So if you want to check out that book, or we mentioned a couple others that you may want to read or reread, you can find links to those for your convenience in the show notes to this episode at manofmastery.com/061 for episode 61. So I would challenge you to see what you can take away today and what you can apply in making some new moves. Maybe you can make some new moves in uncommon ways. So think about that as you listen to episode 61 with Damion Lupo, Black Belt Wealth. Hey, today I'm really pleased to have on with me Damion Lupo. He is a best-selling author, founder involved in more than 50 businesses, creator of Black Belt Wealth, and podcast host of Financial Underdog. So Damion, welcome.
Hey, Michael, it's good to be here. I'm excited to see what we end up unpacking here over the next few minutes.
Yeah, no doubt. We've got a little while and we've got tons we could cover. So this should be fun. Let's see where it goes. I commented off air. I love that you're doing the standing desk thing and you've got some yin and yang stuff there in the background. I want to hear a little bit more of the backstory. I think, you and I each have probably some mindset stuff that derives from some of the arts and other teachings that aren't explicitly things like wealth management and financial planning. So tell me a little bit more about Damion and how you got here.
Man, I got here through a zigzaggedy line. It's funny because we often have these plans, whether it's goals or we, as a kid or an adult, we have a thing, we have a vision, and this is where I want to go, whether it's a job or getting retired or the big house or whatever it is. And I had plans and they went all over the place. And when you mentioned 50 companies, at least half of those didn't work. And, I did part of the backstory. I started off going down the conventional path, went to school, and then got kicked out because I started a bookstore on campus. They didn't like that because I put the other bookstore out of business. So I was doing things that weren't really working with the normal system. The good news is we don't have a normal system anymore. And fortunately, part of my path was becoming a multimillionaire in my 20s and then losing $20 million and going to negative 5 million before I was 30. That kind of experience, and it doesn't matter if it's 20 million you lose or 20,000. If it's everything you've got, it's still everything you've got. And it taught me a lot, where I used to think there's winners and losers. And at that time I was like, oh man, I am a loser. I lost all my money, big old L on my head, like my friend Robert Kiyosaki says, loser. And then I realized, wait, I actually just learned a lot. So there's winners and learners. Like when you lose $20 million, what you've done is you've learned, or if you don't learn, you're going to do it again. And so I spent a couple of years in denial, which is not a good place to live. And then I finally owned it, took responsibility, and shifted to a place where I said, okay, it's my life, it's my responsibility, I own it, my choices. And from there, I redefined really what my focus was going to be and why I was here. So you mentioned mindset, and that's a huge thing for all of us. The context, I was running it from a context of more is better, and what I realized later is more is just more. And you can go rob a bank and have a lot more money, but you might die in the process or go to jail. So more was not the answer. And on the other side of losing all that money, I said, okay, what is it that's important? What's the mission? Because if the mission is just more dead presidents on green paper, then I've done that. It didn't really work out and very well. And so I think the universe really kind of told me in a way, hey, your job is to impact more people in a positive way. And so that's been the shift. And so there's an amazing opportunity to be enlightened when you get humbled that bigly, that big, that badly.
That badly. Yeah, 100%. That's a big hole to climb out of. But yeah, I definitely agree with the way you said that. I have a coach that every time we talk, it's not wins and losses, it's wins and lessons,
Yeah.
right? Because it's what you take away from it and what you apply. And you're just on the martial arts and the mindset background. Is it Aikido that is
Yeah,
your
it
art?
started. Yeah, it started off as a keto, and then ultimately, several black belts later, I developed a martial art called Yokido, which is a blend of Aikido, yoga, and Reiki. So the intention there is that not only are you learning how to deal with conflict, you're releasing the tension. So you're going into relationship with an adversary or that negative energy, and not only are you diffusing it, but you're actually healing it. That's where the Reiki comes into play. So negative bad things come, and on the other side of it everybody's better off. And so it's a very different approach to martial arts. It's not about breaking somebody's arm, it's literally about raising them up in the process of diffusing the conflict.
Oh, that sounds super cool. I don't know much about Aikido itself, but just when you mentioned the jagged path, and I saw that you studied Aikido, so a really formative book for me. There you go, right? George Leonard, Mastery. Looks like you're reaching for the same book, right? He talks so much about the plateaus
Yeah.
and the value in those and the jagged path.
And there's that's funny because Plateaus comes up a lot in conversations, interviews, and just in general, the philosophy that we tend to be impatient. Everything is so fast now. We want to have things yesterday. We look at people, we look at Facebook feeds, and when we see success, we go, "Oh my gosh, that was so easy. It was like immediate." We don't see the 10 years before of plateaus. You look at musicians and you go, "Oh my gosh, they're making 18 or 80 million a year or something." Yeah, and they made nothing for a decade or 2 decades, and that's the plateau. That's doing the same thing over and over again and being willing to stick with it. That's the process of mastery. And if we're willing to be patient and committed, then things change when you pop out of it. And all of a sudden, it's like overnight, everything is good. Well, yeah, it was plateaued for maybe decades.
Right. Yeah. No, I really like the way you think about that. I tend to think of it in my mind as the process and then the event of success. And especially in a social media world, we get snapshots at a time of the success event or that one point in time. But like you said, you don't see the 10 years of hard work putting in your study and your perfection and your mastery that goes into that.
No, in fact, what we're told is, hey, if you do 4 hours of focused work a week, then you're done. His name is Tim Ferriss. I liked him a lot, but it's dumb to think that you can have success and happiness and joy and fulfillment in 4 hours a week. It just doesn't work that way because somebody else is going to work 6 hours and you're going to be like, why am I not making any sales? Why is my life not growing? It's like saying, I'm going to become a black belt. I'm going to work 4 hours and then I'm going to be a black belt. No, there's actually a process of engaging it, of committing to it. And we're looking for these hacks. Like you hear this word all the time. Let's figure out a life hack. Let's do the hack. And it's like, Well, wait a second. Have you ever tried to garden hack? Like, you have to let the season happen. You have to be open to nature. You have to, there's certain things that happen. And if we try to force them, there's a great book called Power versus Force. Forcing doesn't work. It tends to break things. It's like when you flip a house, you know why you pay 60% taxes on forcing a house? Because the universe and the government doesn't want you to. When you build something or you rent something out, you pay no tax. Why? Because there's a lot of power in creating housing. So when you start looking at things with that lens of what's actually powerful, falling in line with the flow of nature and with what systems want, the system wants you to care about other people. Doing housing, building housing is different than speculating. And there's just a different energy around the two of those. So if we step back and ask, am I forcing things, or am I literally in alignment with the universe, with nature, with flow? It really does allow us to be in a place of grace and have a fulfilling life versus that snapshot of success. I mean, that's success versus fulfillment is so powerful when you think about it, because success is a split second. And then it's what's next, versus fulfillment is the journey, like you mentioned, that process. And that's where you want to live, because you can't live in success. It's like blink and it's over.
Right. And then it's what's next, right? It's the what's the next mountain or the next challenge. Yeah, I love the idea of hacks. I think we all kind of find that
Sure.
attractive or sexy somehow, and
Mhm.
and you know, I'm sure there's wisdom captured in that way, but I think of it a bit more as best practices. Really,
Mhm.
it's what's a better way to tackle my health or my diet or my mindset or my sleep or whatever the topic is, gardening, right?
Well, there are great. I mean, yeah, I'm with you, and there are great tools or great ways to do things. But it's kind of like saying, okay, how am I going to hack a great relationship? Like, how am I going to hack great sex where it's passive and I don't actually have to engage? Like, you're not going to have a partner. Like, they're going to leave. Like, if you're trying to hack it versus actually being all in. And it's the same thing with money. You're not going to hack your wealth. Like, you've got to be committed to it. It's the same thing. It really is in a lot of ways we try to shortcut things, and that's maybe the problem, or the right word, versus a hack. It's shortcutting things that you really have to commit. You cannot shortcut like getting in shape. You can't just say, okay, well, I'm going to think about the gym and then I'll be fit. You got to show up there every day and put the time and effort in. And people tend to want to look for the way around that. And sometimes there's just not. Sometimes you actually just have to do the work, which I know is like a four-letter word. People are, oh, work, but it's a thing.
Do the work. Yeah, right. And it's about consistency and sustainability.
Yeah.
Doing the work to carry through. And I love me some Tim Ferriss as well. But ultimately, and I love that book. It's sitting back here as well.
Hmm.
But to me, the more powerful stuff in there is about scale and leverage and things like that. But really, a lot of what he talks about is outsourcing. And so it sort of makes you wonder: did you really enjoy what you were doing at all? If you were willing to just have somebody else do all of it. So maybe it comes back to things like, how do we find fulfillment and how do we apply our passions and our talents into something that we're happy to do for 40 or 50 or 60 hours a week, because it is such a labor of love, or it is fulfilling. So maybe if I know you have so much we could talk about, if we focus things in a little bit on, a lot of us really get caught up by necessity or conventional thinking in the need to spend years going after that typical way of working, getting educated, trying to make money, build wealth. And then I'll call it the financial midlife crisis. Maybe we hit this point in time and we're somewhere up Maslow's hierarchy where we have the ability to step back and think, well, that next dollar doesn't really have the same value to me anymore. Where do I want to focus my time? Maybe it's about thinking about retirement, or what does retirement mean? Is it sitting on the beach, or is it sort of 2.0 of life? And what do I need to do to arrange myself to get there? Uh, do I liquidate a company? What's my number in my retirement account? Do I change my lifestyle? How do I start to think? If we go back to mindset again, maybe a little differently than the conventional thinking about tools like debt. So that's a bunch of questions all in one there. So I'm facing all that somewhere down the road here. So
Hmm.
let's take me as an avatar. Debt. Where do you stand on debt in your life? Because I know one of your missions is what you call freeing people from money bondage. What does that mean?
It basically means where you stop thinking about the money as a limiter of your choices. So if you think about it, especially this is true in America for most people, if you're hungry, you don't go, well, maybe I'll eat today and maybe I won't. And I get it, there are people that are in that space, but for most people that are probably listening or in general, if you chose to go be productive, there, unless you have some mental handicap, it's really it's a choice whether you're going to be broke or not. So let's assume that you've got money. If you're hungry, you go eat and you don't think twice, am I going to eat today or not? With money, what we tend to do is we're always wound up about, should I buy this? Can I afford this? All this kind of stuff. The idea is to get to a point where your life is, you're not making the decisions on what you're doing day to day, how you're living based on whether or not you can afford something. And it's not because you have $100 billion in your account and you're Jeff Bezos. It's like I found myself in this pandemic thing in a place where things got simplified. Like I'm not traveling, I'm gardening. I spend a lot of time Zooming with people. Very few things that actually cost much money. And I'm like, okay, well, what was it that I was doing before? I was going after more and more stuff, more experiences, and I had to keep going and getting more money. And so what we tend to do is just keep doing more and more because that's our system. It pushes us to be good consumers. Like it's when 9/11 happened, what did George Bush say? He said, be good Americans, go consume, go spend money. And like, wait, so that's all we are as consumers? It is because we print money out of thin air and create debt. That's our entire system. And the only way that works is to create more debt and to keep more spending and to have the GDP keep growing. If it goes down, it's a spiral into a depression. And so we have to keep pushing this, but it's not healthy and it's surely not, it's not sustainable health wise. So, when we think about debt, for one of the questions, debt is powerful for you to use as, make it your slave. If you're the slave of debt, you're screwed. So, what does that mean? It means that if you're out there buying a boat or different things and you're taking out debt and then you're going and working to pay for that debt, that's stupid. Literally, if you're going to go play with something, if you're going to go get a boat or you're going to have debt, great, have an asset pay for it. So learn, this is part of the context shifting into being an investor where things are paying for your other things. So it's not you waking up hustling, trying to pay for your damn life. And if you're talking about being free, it's where things, assets, investments pay for everything in your life to where you go, okay, what am I going to do today? I'm going to focus on something that matters. And money is a scorecard, but if it's the reason that you wake up in the morning, that's really sad. And I know that from personal experience. It was very sad because that's what I was focusing on. There's not a number that sets you free. And that's a really weird thing to say because we're taught, okay, you go to a financial advisor and what do they say? They do a calculation. They have this like wizardry and they tell you, okay, you need $3 million in your 401k or in your brokerage account. And that is the biggest lie BS ever. I've had plenty of people that have come to me and said, we want help with our money. They have 2 million, 3 million, $4 million. I had people that have had 10 million plus and they're still concerned. And the people that have multi-millions, they're like, okay, now what? Because we're 50, 60 years old. We don't have 30 or 40 years to recreate this. And we have no idea how that happened other than we were just in the market and it kind of happened. So how do you actually get free? You build the confidence by going through the thing, like actually growing through the experience of learning how to invest. Once you have the confidence, take all the money away. Like I lost all my money, but I said, okay, you know what? I know how to make it. Just like Henry Ford used to say, take all my money away. I'll have it back in 5 years. That's what I did. I mean, I literally did Henry Ford's, his blurb, like lost it. There goes the money, 20 million bucks. And 5 years later, built the wealth again. And it's that confidence through the experience. It's that muscle you're developing. Once you've got the muscle, nobody can take that away. And that's where the freedom is. So when we try to figure out what the number is, we're asking the wrong question. The question is, what is the experience I need to have to grow into the confidence where I don't care whether they take the money, whether I make a mistake that loses something, because I can go recreate it. And once you learn that, it doesn't take you 20 or 30 years. Like I can go create $1 million in a month because I know how to do that. I know how to raise money. I know how to do deals. I don't trade time for money anymore. And that's a big shift. And Robert Kiyosaki made that really famous in Rich Dad Poor Dad. The rich don't work for money. Why don't they? They're working for assets that give them freedom. And that's a big shift for most of us contextually.
Yeah, it is a big mindset shift. I mean, I wrote down a note here that I don't think you said this explicitly, but the way I took it was it's a shift from there's never enough to there's always enough if maybe you're approaching it or thinking about it the right way. And you certainly got a very, very expensive real life MBA is what I like to call those kind of experiences because I've been through something similar. Well, since you mentioned Robert Kiyosaki, I think he said, so ask a specific question about debt, and you made the point of assets and debt
Mhm.
working for you versus against you or shackling you. I think he talks about your primary residence not as an asset, but as a liability. So do you believe in a mortgage being a good thing on your primary residence, or is that something to get rid of?
It's something to get rid of. Rich people don't have mortgages on their houses. You use it as a tool sometimes to leverage, or, I mean, debt is really cheap. And so if you understand debt and how to use it, I mean, the idea of saving your way to wealth when the Federal Reserve and the government are spending, the number I saw globally in the like in 3 month period in 2020 was $18 trillion was printed globally by all the central banks. So are you going to be able to save money faster than they're printing it? The answer is no way, not in your lifetime. And so then you have to figure out how to play by the same rules. People bitch and complain and they say, well, it's not fair. We need to have these giveaways by the government. I'm like, if you just play by the same rules, people go, your rich aren't paying enough taxes. I'm like, don't pay taxes. If you understand the tax code, you don't have to pay taxes. The tax code is set up as an incentive program to get people to have certain behaviors. And if you understand that, it's like, oh, okay, well then what do I need to do? Build a business or build some real estate. And when you say, oh, they're not giving me a tax break for my mortgage on my house, that was a giveaway. That was just to pander to people and get their votes, but that doesn't actually help the economy. So you just have to ask yourself, am I even playing by the right rules? I mean, buying into conventional wisdom, like your house is your greatest asset, is the biggest, dumbest thing ever. It's not it's the biggest noose. Everything, things break. I like having a house, but I also like renting a house, and I like investing my money and having more control. And I think a lot of people have to really look at things differently from all the ways that they were taught they're supposed to look at things. Once you do that, you're going to be like, dang, I was lied to my whole life. And that's just reality.
Well, all the great investors talk about being a bit contrarian rather than
Hmm.
following the herd, and that's all it really is.
Yeah.
Well, I'll take a quick tangent on this one. Speaking of opportunities and play the game as it's written and incentives. Where are you? Where are we speaking from? Where do you live right now?
I'm in Sedona, Arizona,
Okay.
vortex land. So I'm,
Well,
I'm in the mountains of a quiet place.
beautiful, beautiful place. I was,
It
as you were
is.
saying that, I was wondering if you were one of the folks that has moved to Puerto Rico to take advantage of the
It's,
incentives there.
Act 20 and 22 that basically create an environment where you can pay no taxes at all on your income and things. I have a lot of friends that have moved down there, and it's something that's possible going down there. Uh, I think there's going to be a big shift in where people live based on taxes and based on freedom, and based on safety and security. I think ultimately cities are going to change in a very, very big fundamental way. So it's going to be interesting. I think Arizona is going to get invaded by California here in the next couple of years because people are going to say, "Forget this."
Yeah, Arizona, we're coming your way when the fires are out, and hopefully you're
Right.
safe with all that. And Texas certainly has a bunch of us Californians moving to
Hmm.
there. Yeah, I saw a list yesterday. I think that was a prediction of top 5 places that people might shift their thinking to live, and they're a combination of nice weather and the tax structures: Nevada, Tennessee, Florida, Texas, and it actually mentioned Puerto Rico
Yeah,
in
it
that
totally makes
particular.
sense. I mean,
Yeah,
and part of this whole thing that's happened, people are thinking about their lifestyle. They're realizing, I mean, one of the things that's going to get destroyed is like commercial office because all
right,
of a sudden, all these companies are going, wait, do we actually need all that liability? Do we need to do all this, have all this space, and people can work remotely? Well, if you can work anywhere, then why would you live in a place that was congested, that was polluted, that was dangerous? People are going to be moving to other places. So when we think about what are the opportunities, one of the opportunities is there's going to be a lot of people moving to rural areas. And so all those people are going to be wanting all sorts of things. And if you can actually figure out how to serve that or be a part of that ecosystem, then you don't have any. I mean, all you have to do is start thinking about that. And all of a sudden you're not wondering, how am I going to afford to live my life? Well, I mean, there's a huge opportunity sitting in front of everybody.
right. Yeah, great point. I really like. I mean, COVID is challenging, no doubt. Right, it has challenged people, and there are people who have really been hit in a very hard and significant way beyond just health.
Yeah.
But it certainly is an opportunity as well. There's so many, I think, good practices, changes to our lifestyle that people can carry forward. And one of those is just the conventional thinking of having a W-2 salary job is safe. Well, if you didn't, if you weren't already cured of that mindset, this one certainly could have changed that for you. And when you say commercial office space, I would say commercial real estate in general. Like if you think of restaurant space, right? So now if I can only sit half as many people, I'm sure it's not a linear math, but if I can only earn twice as much money gross as a restaurant business, well, what can I afford as rent? So that cascades through to what it's worth a landlord and value of real estate. And, yeah, I love your point about kind of flight to safety and maybe space.
Well, and it's we started doing this a while ago with the shift to the Amazon effect, where people are pushing buttons and we're getting food delivered to us. In America, groceries are only like 1% in terms of delivery, whereas in Europe, I believe the number is like 10, or it was, before COVID. So we're starting to think, okay, what can we do differently? And yeah, things like retail space, restaurants, retail. Is it going to still be there? Maybe, but it's totally changing and it's accelerating. What this did in all likelihood, I've heard a lot of smart people say this just accelerated what was already happening and accelerated us several years into the future based on like push button getting our food delivered to us by everybody's just zooming and they're doing things virtually. So it wasn't that it wasn't already happening. All of a sudden, we just said, okay, let's do a test trial right now for 3 months and see if it works. And guess what? It pretty much worked. I mean, for the most part, it worked. And so for those people that are listening, going, I want it, I just wish it would get back to the way it was. It's never going to happen. And in
Right.
fact, we're going into a totally different space. And if you don't adapt, you're going to get run over.
Yeah, I'll give you a quick anecdote that I think a lot of people are kind of getting on the right track. That it's new normal is, I guess, the cliche, but we're not going back to exactly the way it was. But then I'm constantly amazed, particularly on businesses that really aren't making the shift, at least in my perception. So, quick example, right? My wife and I we have two cars. We're a family of three, 12-year-old son. My wife, she likes to lease her car. So her lease is due. And we're calling the company going, what can you do for us? Do you want to give us a crazy deal to just buy it out? And they're like, we don't really care, turn it in if you want, or lease a new one if you want. I'm like, I'm not even sure we need to, right? I'm driving on the same tank of gas for the last 3 months. We're not going anywhere. I'd kind of rather get one car out of the garage and turn it into a gym, which makes it,
Mhm.
far less of a spend, more of a healthy augmentation or use of space. And I thought these guys were going to beg us for a deal, and they're shrugging their shoulders, going, "I don't really care." I'm like, okay, I don't know how you're going to survive this.
It is interesting seeing a lot of that flippant attitude, and I see other companies that are being proactive. I have a lot of friends that have a lot of multifamily, and the smart ones went out to their residents and were very proactive about talking with them and building and expanding that relationship. What I've found and seen is that the people and the businesses that did the best had deep relationships. Their social networks were really strong, and businesses that had communities versus transactions really thrived because people came and there's a trusted source and something that wasn't just another push button. And so in terms of how this applies to you listening right now or watching, what do your relationships look like with your clients, with your partners, your neighbors, all these things? This is a really good time for us to say, okay, you know what, they suck, and it's time for me to invest time and money and energy into those things, because this isn't going to be the last thing that happens in our lifetime. It's probably not the last thing that happens this decade. That's pretty intense. Relationships change the experience when you go through shit like this.
Right. I mean, do you even know all your neighbors on your street type of thing?
Hmm.
If if it's a safety issue, if it's I gotta borrow a cup of sugar, the old thing like
Right.
that, or as you're saying with businesses, I think if you got those relationships to leverage going forward, or just to tap into to get an understanding of how your ecosystem is thinking to survive or to shift gears.
Hmm.
Um, so I got another question about let's call it financial freedom. I'm sure you've got a better term for it. So we talked a little bit about debt. We talked about assets. We talked about things kind of working for us rather than working for our money. I think some of the scary stuff that's out there, if you think about what's the right number, if I'm your client that's got 10 million, I'm still scared that it's not enough. It's things like healthcare, cost of healthcare insurance,
Hmm.
and healthcare costs that skyrocket. I think it's something like you spend 90% of your healthcare costs across your lifetime in the last 10% of your life. So, do you have ways that you think about that, or ways to offset that? Tim, go back to Tim Ferriss. He would probably say global arbitrage, and I'm going to get my healthcare in Europe or something like that. But how do you think of it here domestically?
Well, yeah, Tim would probably say that because you go to a lot of places and it's free. Just question is, do you want to get it there? And I don't know if the answer is yes or no. But the way to counter that is to really start understanding, learning, and developing your ability as an investor. And when you do that, it's like Jim Rohn used to say. He's like, "Look, I go to places where they really understand capitalism, and as kids, they don't go out and buy a bicycle; they buy two, one to ride and one to rent." And so when you think about that, instead of just buying a house and being a happy homeowner in debt, you buy two houses, one for you and one to rent. And so when you do these kind of things, you start watching your assets grow, and it's interesting because you don't worry about these things like, oh my gosh, healthcare is going to be more, because that's a very linear thinking. It's like, okay, I got to work for the money to pay for the health insurance that's going up 20, 30, 40% a year. If you've got leveraged real estate, as an example, it's not the only one, then you're more than good if you've got those assets working for you and you can still sleep. You don't have to work 24 hours a day. So it's really building the muscle. And so people go, well, I don't know anything about that. Well, how do you get to know anything about that? You start learning something about that. And when you do that, you learn and then you do something and you start to build the muscle. I keep coming back to this because it's not about doing it in one day. If you've got a vision, there isn't a single thing that you can't accomplish in 10 years, whether it's a PhD or becoming worth, building a net worth of 10 million bucks or having $100,000 a month in income. I don't care where you are, 10 years is enough time. The question is, what are you going to do in the next 10 months to put the seeds in the ground for the 10 years? And if you think you're going to do it in the last 3 years and play the next seven, you're going to be in the same place as you are now, 10 years from now. So it's having just a rational seasonal, time frame where things can grow. I mean, again, it's back to power. And so you do one thing, you go, like, you buy an ounce of silver and you go, okay, well, that's interesting. That's like real money. And I'm learning something because my money's involved. And then you want to do something else and it expands. And then eventually you're like writing $1 million checks as if it's nothing. How did that happen? Because you bought one $20 ounce of silver. It starts with something. You have to start rewiring by doing something. It's same with martial arts. You can't just look at martial arts through a window and go, yeah, now I'm a Jedi. Like, you got to go in there and get your face smeared on the mat.
Yeah, no doubt about that. It's again back to wins and lessons, right? In a very painful, literal sense, getting knocked
Mhm.
down and getting back up. So, are you still the tools that you've got at your disposal and that you like to work with people on? Are you still very into real estate? Is it residential? Is it rental? Is it commercial? What do you like?
I mean, I like things that are really recession proof and depression proof. It's funny because the way I looked at the world when I was 20 compared to being in my 40s now, I laugh. I'm like, you get more conservative and more, you're less interested in risk unless you're psychotic as you get older and you just need the rush. And when people come to me and they're like, I'm interested in this, I'm like, dude, you need some adrenaline. Go take up skydiving. Don't do that in your investing. That's stupid. I see people that I was on a call this weekend with some people that are fairly famous that were pitching buying a major brand, and I'm listening to him and I go, you're y'all are investing because they're telling you you're going to double your money in 2 to 3 years. And I was like, that's not investing, that's speculating. And this doesn't even make any sense. But everybody got their greed glands like blew up. And I was like, you guys are dumb. And they're supposed to be a bunch of savvy investors. I'm like, this is literally like a Ponzi scam. And it was just fascinating to see how people they get so wound up they don't look at the risk downside. And I'm like, okay, so great example. I heard Grant Cardone on a friend of mine's podcast, and I liked him, and then I didn't like him, and I kind of like him again. And it was what he said. He said, "Look, I'm investing in stuff that's boring." I'm like, the investors are going to make 5 or 6%, and guess what? We all go to sleep and we wake up and we've actually slept through the night. And I'm thinking, man, you know what? That is one of the smartest things I've ever heard. But most people are like, I got to get all my wealth in the next hour and a half. And so they do stupid things and then they go backwards. And that's the problem. So what do I like about, I like real estate that's getting back to your question. I like things where if there's another pandemic, which I think there will be, if there's another market crash in housing or the stock market or the banking system gets messed up, like we have got a lot of spinning plates that are not based on reality. They're based on smoke and theory. That being the case, what is not going to get hurt? Industrial distribution space from Amazon and the circle around Amazon, things like mini storage. People are going to continue to buy crap on Amazon and keep storing it because they're running out of space in little houses. So, things like that, they don't get disrupted. People are always going to need to live somewhere. My concern with things like housing or apartments, for example, is that the government got really involved in this pandemic with all sorts of regulations. And oh, don't worry about paying your rent. Well, if I own real estate, what am I supposed to do? Don't pay your rent to me. Well, I got a mortgage to pay. So some of that stuff makes me a little bit nervous. And so I would be looking forward, saying this is an interesting thing to approach with a slightly different mindset, with more conservative uh, cash backing it up. Capital reserves that because you don't know what the government's going to do. And then still, we've never, there's no case for somebody saying, okay, here's my business model. I may have no income from any tenant for a year. Like, no, you can't plan a business around that. So sometimes you just say, okay, well, black swan landed on a black swan. It's BS squared, and here we go. Like, sometimes you just have to deal with it. It's a lot of BS, but it does happen. And so this is where the team that you have around you and your mentors and your masterminds, that's where that makes a world of difference, because when you're in the middle of it, it's very emotional and you get stupid because your gut takes over and then you're like shooting in the dark. Whereas if you've got people around you, they'll ask questions that will get you back to a place of truth and where you can make decisions that are rational, not just emotional.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I really like what you're doing and how I understand you're working with people is maybe providing that those bumpers, that peer group, asking some of the right questions. And I would suspect we're going to see a lot more of this, at least here short term. The equity markets have gone irrationally crazy for so long, detached from fundamental value, that now people start trying to chase alpha in different ways. So you and I both, I think, have been on Paul Moore's How to Lose Money podcast. And the comment I made to him was, and it was back to what you said earlier, is when you start to get cute, when you really start to force it or sort of paint the edges on something, when you're out of alignment with really doing something of value that's getting effectively fundamentally rewarded. That's one of the reasons I like what he came on my show as well, talking about storage, and then maybe the lower end of the housing spectrum. I think they do a lot of trailer parks, things
Mm-hmm.
like that, which are also getting scarce. Like, people don't like that in their backyard anymore. Um, so I appreciate the point of there are unknowns there, maybe riskier than they have been in some past decades. Are you in what you personally do and maybe what you sort of coach and see people around you doing? Is it primarily domestic real estate, or do you also like to look internationally?
So I have a number of friends and clients that do stuff in Central America. They like to be able to go out, and some of them are doing stuff in Europe, but the Central American space is, a lot of people from the US are starting to move down there. And so there's just a lot of activity in those areas. I like domestic because I understand it. I mean, when I look at deals, people go, oh, you can make all this money. And I go, I don't understand it. So I'm out. It's like very, very simple. How many times have we heard that on Shark Tank? I don't know this business. So I'm out.
Right.
And so in general, that's my response. Now, on the other side, one of the things that I know Tim Ferriss does, and he's got a lot of good examples. Smart dude. He said, look, I'll invest in startups or early stage stuff with seed capital. I invest for access. I'm not investing because I think it's going to actually make me money. It might, but it's kind of a moonshot. What I want is the ability to actually talk to the founder, to talk to the team, to understand what's going on the inside. There is a very, very high value to being an insider. If you do it with public markets, it's called you're going to jail. It's insider trading. If you do it in private markets, it's actually a great way to build amazing relationships. And so if you're putting 25 or 50,000 bucks into a deal, ask yourself, is this just about the money? And if it is, maybe it's not enough. It's really, thinking differently about why you're investing. And that's why it's not just about the return. Question is, who do you want to be married to? Because investments tend to be a bit of a marriage when you're talking about longer term. Like, I have a hedge fund and it's a 20-year focus. It's not a 2 or 3 years, you're in, you're out, you're speculating, blah, blah, blah. It's literally, hey, we're getting married. Like, your kids are going to come and go while you're still in this relationship with us. That's a very, very different approach. And so you tend to think about things differently. If you're going to be connected to somebody for 20 years, you're thinking all the time, what is the right thing to do here? Because you're with them and they're with you. So it's, you don't want to have something that's like uncomfortable for the next 2 decades. That sounds like crap.
Yeah, I like that question. I like the way you're thinking about that. I mean, I've seen internationally, I've seen some things that, on paper, they start to sound pretty interesting, like, agricultural things, an
Mhm.
avocado farm in Panama. Okay. I see the price of avocados when I go to the store here. I got to pay $2 an avocado organic farm. Sounds interesting, but it's also kind of to your point. Do I understand anything about avocado farming, ownership of land in Panama? Is this legit? Any of that? No. But if it were a way to form a relationship with the people that are creating those investments and those funds and those pools of investors, and understand more about all of it, or have that relationship and then make an investment decision, it's a whole different type of thing.
It does change the nature of it. It's one of the things that I think everybody should be really rational about. If you're going to invest money, get clear on what the heck the thing is, and either make sure you are crystal clear. I'll give you an example. If I have a couple of guys, if they called me and said, "Hey, we have a deal. Let me tell you about it." I'd be like, "No, just tell me how much you want me to send you." So
Right.
I don't need to know if it's avocados or if it's mini storage. I don't care because their reputation precedes them. Same thing if Bill Gates calls and says, "I have a startup." Like nobody's going to say, "Well, I don't know. Do you really have a track record?" Like they're just going to, "What is it? Let me go look at it. Let me go Google it." Like that is not how it works. It's either the team or you're an expert. So either you have deep trusted relationships with people where you can say, "Yep, you got a deal, I'm in." Or if you're investing in a thing, make sure you know what the heck it is. Make sure you've actually done the due diligence on that thing. And then you still need to make sure it's the people because you can have a great deal and okay people and it's dead. You have okay deal and great people, you're going to watch that chicken crap turn into chicken salad. You're like, wow, it's like magic. It's like alchemy. So it's about the people. It always comes down to the people. It's not the thing. Because even, I mean, there are companies that used to do $1 billion a year in sales, and personally, I've seen some of these in this year. They're less than $1 million. They used to do $1 billion within in the last 10 or 12 years, and now they're doing 1,000 times less. And so, what is that? That's the people. It's not that the thing because you can pivot. I mean, Kodak, Polaroid, all these things, they just didn't pivot. Why? Because people. It wasn't because their thing was bad. They just needed somebody to actually rethink it, reinvent it. And so we all have to be doing that. I mean, that's why I wrote Reinvented Life. I had to reinvent everything, me included, inside out. If you don't practice that, then it tends to be a paralyzing event when you have to, and you don't do anything. So it's good to practice.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that you did a YouTube recently that you called "From Chaos to Clarity," which I think is about rethinking how we're thinking coming out of COVID, right?
Yeah, there's always going to be chaos. There's always going to be there's going to be stuff that's just jumbled. It's not going to make sense. One of the most powerful things we can do because of a frontal lobe is we can ask questions. Like you don't go and see if look at a lizard, see if they're asking anything. They're not. They're reacting. They're just reacting. And so we have the ability to plan. And one of the best ways to plan is to ask a question. It's also one of the best ways if you're in conflict, somebody comes at you, ask a question. Totally disrupts the conflict because they're expecting you to respond and fight back. It's kind of like an Aikido when somebody comes at you, you blend and you redirect. That's what a question is. It's literally blending, redirecting, going into a relationship with somebody and connecting. And they go, oh, you actually care. And it's like it changes the energy completely. So in your own self, if you've got conflict or anxiety, ask another question. It's thinking about the thinking. Like if you have to think, how do I think about these things? How do I? And when you start asking, how do I, or what could I, or what's possible, everything changes because your mind is like, I got to find an answer. And then you wake up, you're like, oh, wow, where did that come from? It's because it's in you if you ask the questions.
I love those kind of questions, like what if, or what would it be like if, right? And the process of just kind of letting your brain work on it for a little while, and it tends to come to you when you wake up or in the shower or on a workout, on a run,
Mhm.
those kind of things. Do you I mean, one of the things that I work on myself a lot is my daily routine and my sort of self-care practice to try to put my mind to better use, whether it's make it, it's time to use the frontal lobe, or other times like let's quiet the mind down a little bit and relax. So I always like to ask, do you have a particular daily routine, morning routine, evening routine?
Yeah, that's one of the gifts of this whole pandemic thing. I moved in the middle of it on purpose because I didn't want to be in the city anymore. So I moved to a rural area. And when I moved, I'm right next to the forest. And so I walk out and I have this hike every day. And it's just a rhythm. If I don't do it, I feel off the whole day. It's kind of interesting when you have a presence practice in the morning. When you don't have it, it's just kind of jumbled throughout the day. And so that's my practice. I do that hike. I sit still. I just connect with things that are pure. Really interesting when you're spending time in nature. There's a sense of truth because it is pure. You don't have agendas. Like a tree is not scheming, a lizard is not scheming. Only humans scheme against ourselves. And it's really fascinating when you go into a place where you're surrounded and you're absorbing that energy of truth. Things calm down. And that's the problem. We're surrounded by lies and misinformation and even our fake thinking that we have in our own brains. Shifting into a place of what is true by just being amongst truth absolutely fundamentally changes everything about your entire life.
Great opportunity that you've got there to get out there in nature. I'm a big believer that something about being outdoors, literally being grounded, being in nature, just being, out for a walk in your neighborhood if you can, fresh air, sunshine, which by the way, in the early COVID days, there were these articles coming out about the Spanish flu from a century ago they started using sunshine and fresh air to treat, right? Like, okay, this is pretty commonsensical. And
Mhm.
you're in a beautiful place to do it in Sedona, which has these energy vortices and the whole concept of things there. But certainly a place that's got an amazing sort of energy and beauty to it. Well,
Agreed.
what
Very.
tell me a little bit more before we run out of time, and I want to respect that you've got a limit here as well as your podcast, Financial Underdogs, right? So you cover a whole range of things, but for people who want to tune into that, what is the rhythm there? What are kind of the subjects you cover? Where's the best place to find you, and how frequently are you working with that?
So financial underdogs is really the voice. It's how I look at the world, and I talk to people that I'm impressed with that are not necessarily so impressed with themselves, but that are impressive. There's a humility to the people that show up. A lot of it's me ranting about what is really going on, and I'll riff. And so probably three quarters of the shows are just me kind of almost yelling at the lies and the misinformation, because they're like chasing one of those mechanical rabbits that the Dalmatians chase after. It's like there's no, like, what happens if you catch it? Like, people are told all these lies and you realize it's a fake rabbit. Like, wait a second, I've been going in circles my entire life. It's a terrible situation. So I just basically attack the lies and talk about what's really going on. People go, I want my $1,200 check. And I'm like, okay, I want my PPP money. I want my, and I hear this stuff and I go, do you realize what's going on here? And so some of the stuff is just being clear on, hey, our system is just made up. This money thing is made up, and y'all are chasing it and beating yourselves up for that. Is your life worth trading for something that somebody else is just making up? And so that's one of the things we talk about. Everything. I mean, we're talking about investing. We're talking about hiring people, teams. Why you can't really have A and B people on a team, and like really interesting, weird things that I'd never thought about. I mean, great example. I had my recruiter that has helped me build my team, and we were talking, and she said, yeah, A's like to be around A's. And if you have A's around B's, A's are going to leave. The best people don't want to be around non-superstars. And the B's don't want to be around A's. They want to have C's around them so that they can actually not look stupid. And I'm just like, whoa. So we talk about stuff that you're really not going to hear about other places, and just really the truth. And here's the thing, the truth is going to set you free, especially when we start talking about numbers, because people don't like to look at numbers. Why? Because they don't lie. And so we talk about that stuff, how to look at numbers, how to make them useful versus just getting abused by them. Like, sometimes we don't want to look. I didn't want to look at my numbers, and I found out after a year I spent $2,000 at Starbucks. I was like, oh dang, that's like a problem. And then I said, okay, well, what am I going to do with this? I'm buying Starbucks stock. So back then, that was my answer, and I kind of still went, but at least I was aware of it. Versus, I don't know why I don't have any money left. Like, I thought I was only spending half my check, but there's no more money at the end of the month. Yeah, okay, well, the numbers don't lie. So we talk about that stuff, and once you get to the truth, you can change it. You can plan. If you can't change a lie, so if that's all you've got, you're just going to be swimming around in circles like with just Groundhog Day, and that's going to be your life. So we shift away from Groundhog Day and a life by default into a life by design with these conversations and opening up, a level of accountability and trust around the truth.
Nice. Accountability, life by design, all amazing stuff. So you mentioned silver earlier, and you've kind of mentioned printing money and plate spinning, and even in a sense, sort of wealth preservation and tangible assets. So, what's the biggest lie right now about our monetary and financial system?
That it's going to be fine. I mean, we're being told lies. The wealthiest people are making unbelievable amounts of money because they have the ability to borrow at basically nothing. So it's free money, and they're buying hard assets. And then we're told to put our money in the stock market. Great example of this, like the fraud that's going on, is Hertz. Hertz is in bankruptcy because people aren't using rental cars. Well, Hertz was a bloated machine. So Hertz is in bankruptcy. Hertz went to the bankruptcy court and said, we'd like to issue $1 billion worth of stock. And the court said yes. I'm like, wait, because in a bankruptcy, the shareholders get whacked. They literally lose all their money. They lose their investment. And so what they did is they said, okay, well, we're going to go do this. And why would they do that? Well, they wanted $1 billion to come in. Who gets paid first in a bankruptcy? The bondholders. Well, who's the biggest bondholder with Hertz? The Federal Reserve bought bonds that Hertz bonds. So to protect the Federal Reserve, the bank, I mean, you want to talk about collusion. And so who's buying the shares? People on Robinhood. They're being lied to. This is a great deal because Hertz is such a good brand. No, you boneheads. This is to screw you and to put the money in the pockets of the bankers. So, I mean, this is what I'm talking about. These riffs I go off on, and I'm thinking, how do people not know about this stuff? Because they're just watching the mainstream. It's like it's a herd mentality, and the first question you have to ask is, do I want to take the red pill? Um, I think most of us are like, no, I want to just eat that steak because it tastes good. I don't want to wake up in this like dystopian society, like the Matrix. Like that's really uncomfortable. But the question is, do you want to live in a lie or do you want to live in the truth? And I'll take that weird environment if it's the truth. That's my primary value is freedom. It's truth. It's liberty. So starting from there, everything else is pretty simple. Don't start from there. Who knows where you're going?
Fantastic. So, all right, people tune in to Financial Underdogs, kind of get your riff or whatever you may be going off on business, on team building, on financial system wise, and then that's the voice for people who want to engage at a deeper level. And you mentioned accountability and mastermind and peer group and things like that. What are the other ways that you work with investors or just curious folks?
I mean, there's we do a lot of work giving people control of their retirement money, so they're not just sitting there hoping, smoking a bunch of hopium with the stock market. Like that is not a strategy that's really very good with your investments. So giving people access to their stuff, something that we created called the EQRP, and doing masterminds. 1522 is a mastermind that I lead with people, and so there's lots of ways to help people break the shackles. The whole point of all the work and the companies is to give people control and freedom, and so there's different ways that people can fit into that. I mean, ultimately, this is a community of self-responsibility and liberty. And if you don't think that self-responsibility is more important than being a victim, then you would never fit in here. And ultimately, people sift themselves out, filter themselves out. We have an amazing group of people that have lives by design. I mean, that is way more fun than being a victim and going, gosh darn it, they hurt me. Gosh darn it, those politicians. Maybe we'll elect the best president ever next time. I'm like, okay, you literally are giving away all your power. So it's just more interesting, I think, when we're around people that just make it happen. So that's what this community is all about.
Sure. Yeah, it sounds amazing. A community of, I'm sure there's a very diverse element of backgrounds, but maybe some fundamental themes, including self-reliance. I had a really good conversation recently with a guy who I think I'm going to go do some training with him. It's self-reliance in the sense of he calls it be your own first responder.
I like it.
So it's a lot about awareness, about having the emergency plan for yourself and your family, and being able to protect yourselves, emergency medicine, things that go beyond the neighborhood CPR course type of thing. But again, it's an element of if I do need to call somebody for help, how fast are they actually going to get here? What can I do for myself or my family in the meantime?
Exactly right. The perfect thing. Always have your plan. You don't need to obsess about it. Some people go, that's the only thing. I'm like, there's two ways to look at it. You literally can have your plan B and also have your plan A. Just prep. It's like the optimistic and the pessimistic side of your brain. If you do one or the other, it's a really uncomfortable, out of balance life. It's critical to have both of those because you will get blindsided if you just have one, and that is what most people do. So make sure that you're looking at both sides and planning for both sides with action.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Any of us who have ever planned know that lots of sayings about this, right? Like a plan is God's folly, or no plan survives first contact, or you're just running a project at work. Like it never goes to plan, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I love that point. And then for just in terms of Financial Underdogs, podcast is on all the major platforms.
Mm-hmm.
If people want to find you by way of social media or through 1522 or your other groups, what's the best way to get in touch?
Reach out on LinkedIn and send me an actual message that's not a robot.
No bots.
No bots and no generic things. You know, I love engaging with people. You'll find that I'm pretty generous with my time and my energy. But if you just try to pitch me and that's your first interaction, you're gonna get deleted.
Deleted and blocked. Well, speaking of being generous with your time, Damion, I really appreciate you stopping by today, spending the time with us. It's always fun to learn from new people, and I look forward to tuning into the podcast.
All right, Michael. Thank you very much for having me.
My pleasure. All right. Thank you again to Damion Lupo for his time and to you guys. I super appreciate you. I appreciate you tuning in. And I truly hope you got something valuable out of today's episode and that conversation with Damion, a new idea, an inspiration, a different way to look at things, something uncommon you can apply or make that new move. So the one other thing I would ask of you today is, if you're not already following us on Instagram, please do so. It's at the Man of Mastery. Check out what's posted there, and please interact. Give your feedback and your stories on how this lands for you or how you applied it. And if you do jump out to the website to get that book list or otherwise, manofmastery.com, hit the subscribe link and throw your email address in. You'll get notifications for new episodes and other things that are coming up. And then, as always, when you have a minute, please do me a huge favor and a favor to the audience and the community here, is go out to iTunes, rate and leave a review for the podcast. That helps the Apple Podcasts search engine to get it up there in the ranks and expose it to other people who might also find this information valuable. So again, with that closes out this week with Damion Lupo, episode 61, Black Belt Wealth. I appreciate you guys. Let me know how it goes for you, and we'll see you next week.